Welcome, Jet fans, to another episode of the Jets Life podcast. I am your host, Anthony, and today we're going to go into a little bit more on the preseason wrap up, and we're officially getting to that point where things start to become real. Starting tomorrow, we're going to start getting. Actually, there have been some updates of players being cut to kind of eventually get us to our final 53-man roster. But with that being said, we'll start off with the preseason finale against the New York Giants. Jets win this game 10-6. Mostly uneventful game. On offense, there was really not much to be excited about, but there was some highlights early into the game, mostly led by Izzy Abanikanda, a guy fighting for his roster spot, and happy to see him kind of get that last little burst, show us all on film what we've kind of saw with him coming out of college and never really transpired in his first year in the pros. So a little bit, going on in the first couple weeks that made you think that maybe he's a changed running back. But this last game, they gave him the ball a lot. 9 carries, 83 yards, including the long touchdown, where a lot of poor performance on the tackling by the Giants on that defensive play. He was able to kind of break away where it looked like he was dead to rights, surrounded by Giant players. Does a little spin move, and he's gone. Something to be excited about for a player like him. That's kind of the plays that we were excited about when the Jets eventually drafted him last year. But again, I mean, behind that poor offensive line, limited reps in live game action, we just never saw it. So I think he's kind of grown a little bit out of favor for the most part in a lot of Jet fans' eyes, including my own for a little bit. But I think what we saw in the last game might might just be enough to keep him on the roster. So what I like the most about the Jets running back unit right now, as we currently stand, is that they have Brees Hall, obviously an elite running back, top of the line. You got Braylon Allen, who's going to be a bruiser, and then Abanikanda comes in, and he would really be like your speed back, your guy with the ability to break. Not that obviously we all know what Brees can do, but having another guy off the bench that has that same ability or the ability to kind of just take one to the house at any given point in time. That's Izzy. Um, and then obviously Isaiah Davis comes in as a fourth possible running back. Do I think the Jets end up keeping four running backs? I have a lot of troubles understanding how the Jets can keep, the amount of defensive linemen I think they should keep. It's going to be a tough game that we'll find out here how that results in the next 24, I think 28 hours. I think it's due at 4:30. So yeah, 28 hours from now. So a lot to be excited about. But Izzy kind of getting that last kind of hoorah before the cut down day. Hopefully, it's enough for him to make the roster, as he's obviously somebody we can all get excited about. Continuing down the line, Adrian Martinez. Ooh, he's talking about running backs. I got into Adrian Peterson for a moment there. Adrian Martinez wrapped up his preseason in a favorable way. I think he's a player that, if it came down to Peasley or him, I don't think either of them are making the 53 by that means. But if it came down to him and Adrian Peasley, I think he kind of broke away from it. Didn't have amazing stats. 12, 20. I think he had about 23, 25 rushing yards, somewhere along that path, 99 yards. Nothing to go crazy about, but that 2-minute drive at the end of the game using his legs and his arm to get us into field goal range was something pretty excited for a guy that, was on the roster for too long until training camp started. So I think he's definitely earned his right to be here on the practice squad and continue to develop behind Aaron Rodgers, Tyrod Taylor. What that eventually turns out to be, who knows? But I think that based on what we saw in his preseason finale, I think he's earned that spot. Another offensive player that I thought played, you know, pretty well overall. But the biggest highlight of the night I felt like was behind Izzy's long touchdown run was Brandon Smith's sideline catch. At my eyes, it looked like he was well out of bounds. He had no business coming down in bounds with that football, especially the way he was falling out of bounds. But somehow, some way, this guy continues to make amazing catches, and that's a trait that is a big trait to have in this league. Making crazy catches, going up and getting the football, coming down with it, especially in a tight area. Very excited what he did there. Do I think it gets him on the 53-man roster again? I think when you look at this wide receiver room, it's pretty steady at the top five who they're going to end up keeping. Does he make it as a sixth guy? It'd be interesting to find out, interesting to see there. But I think he has done some pretty good stuff. My only question is, I mean, we've seen him doing this week in and week out against, you know, third, fourth stringers on in these preseason games. Didn't really get to see enough of it at the top, at the against top level opponents. Anybody who's at training camp, if you've seen it and you have any kind of insight to that, definitely feel free to leave a comment. But I mean, if the Jets are seeing the same thing in practice that we're seeing on in these preseason games and against higher opponents, like if he was, one on one against Sauce, DJ Reed, Michael Carter, it would have a little bit more, obviously, um, more to do with whether or not he makes the team, other than going against these like back tier roster players who may not even be on the teams that they were playing against. So again, pretty exciting for him to get that opportunity. I think if he gets waived, there's a good chance that he goes somewhere else. Um, yeah, there are plenty of teams out there with holes at wide receiver and not much wide receiver depth that can potentially use a player that has his abilities on their teams. Whether or not that comes to it, who knows? But pretty exciting stuff that we saw out of Brandon Smith all preseason long, and hope he sticks around in some capacity. But exciting for him. He's definitely got an opportunity somewhere, in my opinion. Moving over to the defense side of the ball, and there's lots to be excited here. Obviously, the Jets won this game 10-6. That's not by accident. This defense was absolutely outstanding. Again, this is going down to like the tail end of the roster, so but a lot of fringe 53 man roster players coming out there with big plays. I'll start off with one player who's, I mean, I think obviously um, guaranteed a spot in the 53 man roster, and that's Quantez Stiggers. What I gotta say about this guy, I mean, he had a little bit of a rough game. Got called for a holding penalty on a play that, had he not held, obviously an easy pitch and catch from Tommy DeVito. But whenever there's a tackle being made and he's on the field, if you really just like kind of take a look at your TV screen and look for him, he's almost every single play somewhere in the picture, and that's awesome for a player like him. And I think it has a lot to do with what got the Jets excited for him. He was a ball hawk um, in the Canadian Football League. That's why he was named one of the outstanding rookies in that league. You don't get all those interceptions, you don't make all those big plays unless you have the ability to find the football or, wherever it is on the field. And I think that we're seeing a lot of that in these preseason games. What that turns into the regular season, who knows? But that's something to be excited about. A player that just has a nose for finding the football where it is on the field and always be around. That's going to lead to, if there's a punch out, a fumble on the floor, he's going to be there. If there's a missed tackle, he'll be right there to kind of clean things up. These are the kind of plays that you want to see a player making, especially a guy on the back end of the roster. That's going to go over very, very well with this coaching staff, especially a staff that kind of predicates on doing your assignment, doing your jobs, find the football. Um, big thing for Stingers there. Chaz Surratt, who again I think is a pretty destined to making the 3-man roster, with a big fourth down stop on the Giants' first drive, I believe it was, or maybe it was their second. I forget exactly when. Giants were marching down the field. It was a 4th and 2, I believe it was, and he blew it right up, right in the backfield, and they got nowhere close to make it into the sticks. Big fourth down stop for Chaz Surratt there, so got to give him a little bit of props there. Running down the list here, and we get to the real fun part of this entire preseason, and that's the front four and the decisions that are going to have to be made here. You know, it's sad to say it, but there's going to be a good defensive player that may not be on this roster, and the kind of three guys that are on that like teetering at the bottom edge of the 53-man roster. Um, Zach McKinley, Brady McGregor, and Lawrence Taylor III, and you can even throw Eric Watts in that conversation as well. Four good players that have all shown a little bit of promise, and good chance only two of these guys end up making it to the 53-man roster. How that shakes out, not 100% sure, but you know, McGregor coming in with 2 sacks in this game, McKinley 2.5 sacks, and his celebrations were just kind of things on game day that will just get you excited. He hit the spin-a-rooney on one. He hit the Sean Merriman, celebration when he would get sacks late in the game. Just an exciting player. Got right around the edge. on Evan Neal on a sack earlier in the game. He was just, a dominant player as you expect from a former first round pick going up against, kind of lower tier players. But that Evan Neal sack, he just kind of zoomed right by him. Um, just exciting stuff to see. McGregor just, from the moment the Jets got this guy, I just like, just loved his like frame, loved his size. Kind of looked like a player that can really kind of come in and, you know, demand a spot right away. And I think he has. I think he's definitely one of those players that, you know, the Jets are going to have a tough decision to make here. I don't know that, you know, any of these four players. I'm pretty sure if they get waived, they're going to get picked up somewhere else. Um, it's just going to happen. And then obviously, Lawrence Leonard Taylor III. Um, he's same thing. There was a series of plays back to back to back. He was in the backfield making plays, and it's not just in the pass rush situation. There was one play where he just kind of zoomed right past an offensive lineman on a run play where the running back was going the opposite direction, and he caught up to speed and tackled him from behind. Those are all plays. I think if you told me right now to pick one of those four players that would definitely make the team, I think LT the third is definitely going to be that guy to make the roster 100%. Again, this is just my from my eyes. Who knows what they're thinking inside the Jets building? But when you look at this Jets team, there's a lot of talent in the edge spot. The interior, you could say, has not as much talent. So letting a guy just walk out who's shown that he can play pretty damn well in the interior. I think it almost a no brainer that he's on a 53 man roster. But we'll see how those things shape out. So that was offense, defense. Now moving over to special teams. Not all pretty stuff here. Obviously, Codrington continues his success as a returner. Um, he's going to make it tough, but I mean, who the Jets have as returners on the long kickoffs. Obviously, Gibson's going to be your primary punt returner, so maybe it's a situation where the Jets just can't fit him on the roster. But you know, there's obviously going to be some conversations with Codrington and what he can do. Maybe they try and sneak him on the practice squad, but he had an outstanding preseason with a lot of exciting punt returns and kick returns. Wonder if the Jets can find a way to keep him on the roster. And then the bad, um, it's a preseason game, not making a lot of it, but Greg Zuerlein going 1 for 3 when we're approaching a season that is full of excitement, full of what we hope to be a lot of wins, and a lot of these games come down to a kick. Going 1 for 3 and missing two gimme shots doesn't always make you feel the greatest, but hopefully he got those bad kicks out of his system, and going to start the season off on fire like he was all of last year, like he was the year before. Would be absolutely amazing to have that kind of be his last bad kicking performance in a game that doesn't matter. But you also just don't want the stuff to get to a kicker's head. Kicking game is very mental, so kicker that's down on himself or may not be feeling confident is never a good thing as you start to approach and head into the regular season. So hopefully, like I said, putting the bad kicking behind him and looks forward into the regular season. Other than that, not much to speak of. We're approaching a big news day for the Jets overall, which would be tomorrow at 4:30 when these rosters finalize. But the biggest story, obviously, and it will be the biggest story until something gets done, is what's going on with this Hassan Reddick situation. As we all know, Hassan Reddick is, on his holdout. He's on day 35 of this damn thing, and I think it reached the point that's, you know, something's got to get done. It's just the way it is. Jets have told him they're not going to trade him. Doesn't make too much sense for him to hold out the entire season. That would just be silly on his part, on his agent's part, everything included. It would just be kind of a dumb situation to just not show up at all. The fines are starting to get bigger and bigger. Once we get to the regular season, you're starting to miss game checks. The fines will even continue to grow. You almost reach a point at some time that these fines outweigh what you may have gotten in a pay raise, and that's something his agent needs to figure out. The leverage game, I think, lost its luster a little bit with the performance these back end Jets defensive linemen. Obviously, he comes in and he puts something to the top of the roster that these players that are at the bottom may not be able to contribute, you know, anytime soon or even ever in their careers. But had this defensive line just been atrocious, I think the JFM trade was probably the thing that kind of changed everything if I had to guess, because by all accounts there was an agreement. He was going to be here. He was going to be practicing. He was going to be at minicamp. He was going to be doing all the things that we would have expected. Things that Aaron Rodgers did last year after he was traded. He came here, got to work. Um, there were even videos with him talking to Sauce, saying, "I can't wait to be here," so on and so forth. It was out there. He was going to be here. There was no reason to believe that he wasn't going to be here. Even in his introductory press conference, he said, "I will be here. I can't wait to be here." So something changed. Something drastic changed. Whether or not it was, you know, the Jets had just kind of deviated away from their initial offer and offered him less, I doubt that to be the case. That would just be super silly when you have a player that you traded for that said no to a current contract. I mean, it wouldn't make sense to me. Um, but the only thing that I can point to and say, like, what could have changed everything is when you're in these negotiations, leverage drives everything. And trading away JFM definitely, increase that leverage marker for his agency, saying, "Hey, they traded away a premier run defender, somebody that they, were very high on to make room for us. Well, they made room for us, so let's attack it." Uh, you know, some could call it negotiating in bad will. Some will call it, doing what's best for their primary client. But at some point, when you're trying to do the best for your client, you also got to look at what's going wrong. And what could definitely go wrong here is him missing game checks, that those fines growing, and him just never seeing that money again. Um, it's frustrating. It's annoying. I know we're at day 35. I believe one of the Jets beat writers, I think it was Samini, posted that this has reached Darrelle Revis length. At this point in time, day 35, the Jets were able to sign Darrelle Revis. Does it happen here today? I don't know. I feel like we would have heard something, at least him having a meeting with the Jets. Something would have made its way into the Twitter universe or whatever, X universe, that something was happening, some movement was happening. But up until now, there's nothing. We're just going to keep crossing our fingers, hope something gets done. I think there's a big push for something getting done after Labor Day weekend. I think there's some requirements there to be there for the game prep week, or else your fines kind of hit another plateau. So maybe that's kind of a internal deadline for his agency. Say, hey, like, I think we pushed as long as we can. Jets aren't budging. Let's figure out what the heck we can get done, so at least we minimize the damage. Maybe they work something in. I think there's been negotiations in the past where that mandatory portion of the fines can be kind of waived or whatnot, um, or the optional fines can be waived or whatever. Maybe that's something the Jets do as a notion of goodwill to just get this thing done. Um, but we'll see how it all shakes out. But it's definitely frustrating. This is a team that went to the season high hopes. You know, after last year's horrible start, there was definitely high hopes to kind of get things right this time around. And I think we reached a point here where you know outside noise, stay away, and it's here. It's here. It's annoying. It's got to get done. But the last time the Jets had a holdout of this magnitude that went this long, they made it to the AFC Championship game that year. Didn't win it, but they made it there. Can only hope that history kind of repeats itself, getting us there, and we change things around by making it even further. But obviously, a lot of time from between now and then to reach that point. But that's really all I got here. Jet fans, stay patient. Something has to get done. It just wouldn't make sense for anything else to happen here. Could the Jets still trade him, even though they said they won't? They could, but I think they're all in. They've, by all accounts, shown that they're all in. The last thing, get this guy done, and let's go win some games, starting with Week 1 against San Francisco. It's gonna be a tough matchup, obviously, but we definitely need a premier pass rusher in that game to make things somewhat easier against a very, very, very strong opponent. If you haven't already, Jet fans, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and most importantly, let's go Jets.